Through our discussions today, we'll consider how parents' voices can shape policy, drive reform, and build schools and education systems that are inclusive, equitable, and future-ready. To help us unpack the pathways that parents can become more engaged in school life, we're joined by two distinguished presenters, one of them who is here with us in person, and one who wishes they were here, and we wish she was here with us, but she'll be joining us online. First, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Mohamed Yassin, the engagement lead for the Caribbean region at the Global Partnership for Education. With over a decade of experience in international development, Mohamed has worked at the intersection of government, donors, civil society, and education partners to strengthen our systems and drive policy reform. His work spans curriculum and assessment, education technology, teacher support, data use, and innovative financing. Mohamed brings a wealth of insight into how parents, through organized structures and collective action, can shape our education priorities and track the outcomes that matter most to us. He'll be sharing some examples from around the world, showing how parents have successfully moved from the sidelines to leadership roles, both at the school level and also at national education policy spaces. Following Mohamed, we will hear from Mrs. Paula Ann Moore, a leading education advocate in Barbados and across the CARICOM region. Paula Ann is the founder and the coordinator of the Group of Concerned Parents in Barbados and the Caribbean Coalition for Exam Redress. Since 2020, she has mobilized parents, teachers, students, unions, and ministries in a collaborative effort to ensure fairness, accountability, and the continuous improvement of our education systems. Her advocacy has influenced national and regional policy conversations, helped secure important changes in regional examination review processes, and has deepened stakeholder engagement. Drawing on her experience, Paula Ann will present a powerful real-life case study that will illustrate how parental leadership can emerge in practice, the lessons that have been learned along the way, and some recommendations for us to consider moving forward. So together, these two presentations will offer both a global perspective and a regional lived experience of parents as transformative partners in education. They will set the stage for the discussion that we will have collectively on how to build structures that embed parent voice in school-level decisions and education policymaking. After their presentations, I'll invite all of you to join the conversation and engage with the presenters. It will be your opportunity to share your ideas, expertise, promising practices, and reflect on how these presentations resonate within your own contexts. The discussion will also allow for us to think collectively about the actions we can take together to elevate the role of parents in school transformation. So with that, let's begin. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Mohamed Yassin.
Right. Thank you, Neva. Hi, everybody. Hope we're all full of energy. I don't know if I'm an expert, but basically, when I joined the Global Partnership for Education, a key thing that we have been working on is, which is a bit different from how I used to operate, working with different countries, is how do we bring everyone to the conversation? And this is where it's bringing me to this conversation right now. So the Global Partnership for Education is it's actually the largest platform that brings a diverse set of stakeholders interested in education. It starts with the countries and the governments, but actually in our board it expands to civil society, teachers associations, private sector, students, foundations, etc. And we try to get a very diverse set of opinions at the global level to advocate for education and work on education system transformation. But also we map this global structure at the local level through what we call local education groups. And through those local education groups, we try to get everyone involved. Now, the Global Partnership for Education, for the countries who are members of GPE, they would recognize it. For other countries, so basically it is the largest fund solely dedicated for education. It's in the Caribbean region, only 8 countries are eligible for GPE financing, and this is due to income classification. So basically, countries classified as middle income that are meet certain criteria are eligible for GPE financing. We have Belize, Dominica, Guyana, Grenada, Haiti, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, and recently Suriname. I don't think Suriname actually knows, so if Suriname is in the room, please talk to me after the conversation, because that's a surprise for them. They're recently made eligible. So, as I was saying, GPE is the largest fund exclusively dedicated for education. Most of our financing goes directly to the government, is for government priorities, and we do align all the partners to that government priority. However, we do have other types of funds that the partnership have decided that are important. And one of those funds is called Education Out Loud. So this is a uniquely exclusive fund dedicated for civil society. And the idea is that in order to affect education system transformation, we do need to understand the community's reality. We need an inclusive policy dialogue that involves students, parents, teachers as well. And we need to fulfill the principle of mutual accountability. So EOL, or Education Out Loud, is $133 million. This is on like a span of, I think, 8 years. It has 79 grants in 83 countries, only one in the Caribbean, which is Haiti. So as you can see, there's not a lot of uptake in the Caribbean, but this is something we hope to change. And the idea is that this fund supports grants for civil society groups or coalitions, actually, to be involved in setting the agenda, setting policy priorities, and then working with the government, working with all the stakeholders in education to improve education. So some of the things that EOL finances are involvement in the policy dialogue, so civil society participation in planning processes, monitoring of education sector plans, etc., public engagement such as community mobilization activities, work on data and transparency as collecting some assessment that civil society can lead, some analysis as well, and strengthening the capacity. And this is actually, most of our grants have those components, strengthening the capacity of the coalition of civil society. So basically building the capacity of the civil society members. And usually recipients are either national coalitions or even transnational or basically regional coalition. So we thought it's very timely that we discuss this now that the symposium will lead to the establishment of the Caribbean National Parent-Teacher Association, because this is something that we can look at in the future in terms of financial support that GPE can offer, because the goal is to make sure this association is completely participating in the dialogue at the regional level and within each country as well as the constituencies. So one option is the Education Out Loud Fund that actually supports that engagement. All right, so what sort of, if you want to think about engaging parents from supporters to leaders, what are some of the main kind of framework to look at, and what are some of the main areas or dimension to look at? So the first thing is we want to make sure that parents, and this is taking the assumption that parents are already supporters of education, so parents at least are engaged and know what's happening in the schools of their children. So that at least is an assumption we're going on, but this is, I guess, number one, is parents knowing what's happening. But then the first thing in terms of leadership is, let's say, it's called setting the agenda, which is basically understanding what's happening in the education system and actually influencing the priorities of the government in the education system. And particularly voicing or mobilizing the voice of the most marginalized children. So we see parents really playing an important role in highlighting the main issues and particularly for the most marginalized children. For example, I'm going to give some examples from a few countries. In India, Uganda, and Kenya, parents have been involved in community-based assessment of learning. So some of those tools exist, such as Acer and others. And using those kind of data that they collected about, what are children doing, they use it to kind of advocate with the government to focus the education priority more on learning and the learning gaps that are happening, but kind of using those community-led assessments to lead that conversation, and using the fora available to parents to kind of engage with policymakers. Another example from Pakistan is, and this is kind of advocating for the most marginalized children. So in this case, in very rural Pakistan, parents mobilized to kind of open more learning opportunities for girls. I mean, this applies to other contexts, such as, in this particular context, children with special education needs. And while there is opportunities available, there is more work to be done on mainstreaming and inclusion. So this is something that the parents can help in setting the agenda, which the government might not even have the expertise, but this is where parents can actually bring that expertise, bring that assessment, bring those voices from their own children and from other parents. So this is the first dimension about setting the agenda. The second one is about following the money. Obviously, money is very important, but parents play an important role in understanding how money is spent in the education sector. Not only in raising money, but actually in following through and being part of the budgeting discussions. So those are done through kind of observatories and through specific relationships with schools. There's an example from the Dominican Republic where there's kind of school boards that involve parents and teachers that actually review budgets and keep schools accountable on how they're spending money and kind of identifying gaps. There's other observatories, like in Benin, for example, in Africa. They formed observatories that follow the budgets of the ministry and the budget at the district level and the budget at the school level to see how money is spent in education. And this is very important because, at the end, where the money is spent impact how improvement in education and transformation of education system. Then we go to tracking what matters, and it's basically developing tracking system in the absence of strong monitoring and evaluation or data systems from the government. Parents can also step in and have particular indicators that they would like to follow through and agree with the ministry on what sort of data they would like to follow through. So some of it is, for example, on teacher attendance or absenteeism. And this is something we've seen across the world where parents play a role in reporting whether teachers are showing up to the class or to the school. And this kind of supports the local school, supports the ministry in ensuring teacher presence. In the context of the Caribbean, this could be very different. It could be actually following through on student attendance also and following up on dropout and what we can do to decrease dropout, for example. And then the fourth one is making it accountable, and it's about grievance redress mechanism or accountability mechanism or social mechanism where parents can, let's say, I don't like the word complaint, but kind of flag where there are weaknesses at the district level, at the national level, to make sure all the actors are accountable when there is something that goes wrong. And then finally, it's about powering the partnership, and this is about capacity building, and this is very important. And so in order to make sure parents are very engaged and are following through, we do need to build the capacity of parents to be able to do that, right? Like, we can't assume everyone will know how to do that. And so there are examples actually from Jamaica where there has been direct training for parents on how they could engage and what role they could play. And so those could be scaled up. So those are kind of 5 dimensions, kind of looking forward, being more action-oriented in terms of when the Caribbean National Parent Teacher Association and some of the national PTAs here about how we could kind of do more, how we could do more in setting the agenda and being part of the policy dialogue and working with the government, identifying what are the gaps and what are the priorities, following the money, so having clear understanding of costing and budgeting and where money is being spent, tracking what matters, having clarity and agreement with the government, with the schools. What are we measuring? How are we measuring attendance? How are we measuring all those learning? How are we measuring all those important measures that we need to know? Accountability system between parents, the schools, the district, the national level, and then finally building the capacity of parents to engage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think for sharing with us a little bit about how parents can evolve from their roles as supporters to leaders. And I think the diagram that we can see in front of us is really important. It kind of provides some useful pillars for us in shaping our priorities, following the money, tracking what matters, and ultimately strengthening accountability, which I think is important to all of us as parents and educators. These pillars or dimensions really provide a clear roadmap for us to consider in our discussion. But before we do that, building on this foundation, our next presenter joining us virtually will use a case study to illustrate for us what some of these pillars look like in practice right here in our region. Paula Ann, welcome, and over to you.
Good day all, and first I would like to thank the CDB and the education stakeholder partners for the honor of the inclusion on this illustrious panel. Apologies for not being able to attend in person. And for the too long, didn't read top line, I just want to set the table to say that I'm providing a different perspective and demonstrating, as Neva mentioned, a real world case study of parental leadership in action. This is a forward-looking, solution-oriented assessment. First thing to start, the genesis of our parental advocacy, and just to back up a bit, I am the spokesperson and coordinator of two entities, the Group of Concerned Parents of Barbados and the Caribbean Coalition for Exam Redress. We were formed, or we came about in 2020 as a result of the grading crisis in 2020 arising out of the pandemic. And it was clear that the results coming out of CXC in that year demonstrated major anomalies. We as parents, our son was directly impacted. Our school recognized that something was not right. We met with our school PTA and we did not receive the response that we would have liked. We interacted at the ministerial level, thanks to the kind assistance of the president of the Barbados Secondary School Teachers Association, Marianne Redmond. We were able to obtain linkages within the Caribbean. We realized that this was a situation that was not school specific or jurisdictional specific. And we realized that there was a regional challenge. The reason why our advocacy came about is that in this situation of crisis, the normal entities that we would have expected to represent the children's interests were not responsive enough. There was a lot of advocacy in terms of street protests and other action, and there was official recognition. The Barbados Prime Minister, Mia Mottley at the time, said what was done to the children was not right. There were a number of review requests, a 1,200% and a 900% increase for CSET and CAPE respectively, which was obviously an indication that there was a significant challenge. We could not help but contrast this reality with the UK's 2020 response. They had a similar challenge with their grading, and the flawed grades were replaced. There was ownership and acceptance of responsibility and apology, with a stated claim to reduce the stress and uncertainty of the students. Now, people do ask, why the focus on 2020? This is 5 years later. And the reality is that that crisis exposed pre-existing weaknesses in our regional education ecosystem. As the then president of the Caribbean Union of Teachers, Dr. Garth, indicated, that there existed pre-existing comorbidities in education. There were issues relating to quality assurance, governance, stakeholder engagement, transparency, accountability, and communication. There was suboptimal options for conflict resolution when the grades were disputed, and limited legal accountability. We have advocated since 2020 for governance reforms at CXC and at the national and regional level, where parents and students can be incorporated in operations and communications that demonstrate in tangible manner and ways care and concern for students. We have recommended that an independent expert exam body regulator, akin to the UK's Ofqual, be implemented as a solution-based mechanism. This recommendation was endorsed by the Barbados then Minister of Education, Santia Bradshaw, at the 2021 Minister of Education Summit. It is our view that the issues that I have mentioned that arose in significant measure in 2020 continue to impact the delivery of regional education services. And there are a number of instances every year annually, including exam challenges, exam papers that have been assessed by master teachers within CARICOM as having challenges that really do need sufficient redress. Clearly, there is time for action, and there are significant ramifications that require action. We don't want students to be demoralized and perceive grading as arbitrary. We don't want economically privileged parents exiting public school systems for alternative exam bodies. We don't wish an erosion of trust and credibility and reputation of our Indigenous exam body, of which I'm a proud recipient and beneficiary of. And we don't want a damage long-term to the regional credibility and reputation. Arising out of the challenges in 2020, our movement has expanded its advocacy to national and regional education policy. And we were the recipient of recognition at the highest political level when we were invited to give a presentation at the February 2025 Heads of Government Summit in Barbados. This case study really is a tangible indication of what GPE has recommended as transformative change, enabling parents. In our advocacy, we have set the agenda for care and concern for students at the forefront of education policy. We have tracked what matters, and our movement has demonstrated over and over again that we need tangible opportunities for accountability at the highest level. This is what our group has attempted to do over the last 5 years. We also demonstrated that sometimes the pre-existing bodies really have challenges in terms of being sufficiently responsive, either in terms of crisis or ongoing mechanisms relating to education policy. And there are many reasons for that. Oftentimes, there are cultural and traditional reasons in that parents may not see themselves necessarily traditionally as leaders in education. Sometimes the policymakers see parents as more passive as opposed to active stakeholders and sitting at the table in terms of being part of the decision-making process. We have been blessed at a personal level to have very active PTAs in the schools of our three boys who are now young adult men. PTAs do the Lord's good work. I have been privileged to work with PTAs, but oftentimes PTAs are seen to be more relegated to a fundraising or administrative support role versus operating at decision-making or policy-making roles. Culturally, our authority figures are often deferred to rather than being held accountable. Oftentimes, parents will come to me and ask me to advocate on their behalf, and they're either afraid or unwilling to come forward to advocate on behalf of their children because there is a fear of victimization. So, and additionally, I would also put on the table that oftentimes it's difficult for PTAs, whether at the school individual level or at the national level, to divorce themselves if members of the executive are also employees of the respective ministries, where it may be a situation that challenges the status quo. So those are some of the reasons I have indicated why change is difficult. However, we're looking at solution-driven basis of analysis, and it is very exciting and thrilling to be part of this symposium because it demonstrates that we nationally in Barbados, under our education transformation drive, and regionally are solution-driven, forward-facing, looking at a dawn of a new day when it comes to creating an environment in the education ecosystem to look at what we have done and how we can improve it. I would note that CXC in April 2020 made an announcement of governance reforms, which is welcome. I look forward to the additional sessions where CXC is focusing on elucidating on those reforms. And we also need to drill down to ensure that the parental inclusion is as maximal as possible. This symposium demonstrates putting the proof of the pudding by eating in terms of how CARICOM education stakeholders, multilateral partners, and the Ministry of Educational Transformation in Barbados have come together, dedicated significant resources in moving forward to create the dawn of a new day as it relates to education for our children. And I commend all the entities and individuals involved in this exercise. So in conclusion, I would say that as GPA states, parents power the partnership. And in transforming education across the region, we nationally and regionally honor the UNCRC, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child obligation, which include prioritizing children's best interests and respecting their views. We are demonstrating through this symposium, and no doubt the outcomes of the symposium, that parents are empowered to enable one of the core UNCRC rights of the child, that our children have the right to education that enables them to reach their fullest potential. Our children deserve fairness and justice seen in other international education systems. I would also exhort everyone here coming together that while I appreciate and we appreciate that one of the core purposes of this symposium is to formulate the Caribbean PTA initiative, that we recognize that there are many parents that are not part of a formal PTA, and that we ensure that the broadest parental and inclusive engagement is pursued. All parents must be included as much as possible in the new parental entity, and inclusion must be the guiding light. Let the floodgates of parental engagement be opened in any means as possible, as many means as possible. So I would conclude by thanking all of you for this honor and this wonderful opportunity to be part of this collaborative effort. God bless you all. All the members of the two organizations and entities that I represent look forward to collaborating nationally and regionally in the outcomes of this event. And we stand ready, all of us stand ready to be an integral part of the follow-up of and the key performance indicators arising out of this illustrious event. So thank you again for listening. I hope I didn't put anyone to sleep, and I look forward to further dialogue emanating out of this initiative. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Paula, for what was, I think, a deeply grounded presentation. Your reflections really remind us that when parents are informed, organized, determined, and when they have strong relationships, which was something we talked about this morning, we can really move from being advocates on the margins to central partners in driving accountability, influencing policy, and shaping the educational experiences in a positive way for all of our children. So we've heard from both of our presenters today that really the transforming the role of parents is going to require action at multiple levels. We've heard several phrases in both the presentations, as Mohammed first highlighted and Paula seconded. Parents need to be able to be empowered to set the agenda. We can do a better job at following the money and tracking what matters, determining what matters to us, and ultimately holding our education systems and our schools accountable. And Paula, I think you also really showed us that it's not just about those matters, but it's also about ensuring that we have courage, persistence, and build the partnerships that are important for parents to be able to step forward as leaders to build the education systems that all of our children deserve. So now, participants, colleagues, this is where we get to open up the conversation, because building these stronger partnerships between parents, educators, and policymakers takes all of us here in this room. So I invite you now to share your reflections, any experiences, what resonated with you from these presentations, what questions surfaced for you as you listened to each of our presenters, and maybe most importantly, what are some of the practical solutions that you might suggest to elevate the role of parents and PTAs as leaders? The floor is open.
Good afternoon, everyone. Eduardo Ali, Caribbean Examinations Council. I'd like to thank both presenters. I think one of the themes that seems to ring well from both presentations that took us back to what was shared this morning is the importance of inclusivity in terms of partnership. And I listened attentively because what I felt coming out of both presentations, that certainly was echoed this morning, and I think Dr. Bristol was the one who raised the issues, is that we have to find a means for parents, whoever they are, to be at the table to share their perspectives, and not just championing it from a leadership perspective, but from an advocacy perspective based on their experience. Quite often, in the construction of our fraternities, we create opportunities for individuals to be included to some extent, and those who wish to be included may not be included. And I think we have had those conversations, those perspectives this morning. So my question is, and I'll just make another comment after, my question is, how do we encourage that inclusivity, so those persons who are leaders and advocates, wherever they might be, who may be on the margins of the decision-making and planning as it relates to PTAs or other bodies, could be engaged and be part of the transformative process? That's my question to both panelists. And all I would say is that in relation to some of the references that were made regarding CXE, stay tuned for the presentation that Dr. Manning and I would make on Thursday, where we will set you ablaze in terms of some of the transformational agendas we are working with to ensure that there's an inclusive environment for decision making. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Paula. First, I want to thank you,
I actually would, if it's okay, would like to give the presenters an opportunity to respond, and then we'll take the question, if that's okay. So the question was about how can we do a better job at fostering the inclusivity that we've been talking about this morning and through the presentations, and it was fielded to both Paula Ann and to Mohammed. Paula Ann, I'll give you the floor first, and then we'll go to Mohammed.
Thank you, Neva. I can only talk or give a indication based on my personal experience, and I would say, I'm sorry, let me pause first. Are you getting an echo? Because I'm hearing an echo from my side. Is the audio okay?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. My personal experience, again, I keep saying the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I have to say, I have to commend the Ministry of Education and now the Educational Transformation. Please bear with me, I'm sorry, for embracing our advocacy and moving us from perhaps going public when we didn't get the response that we wanted to get to being integrally involved in policy making at the government level. We've been involved with the Ministry of Education in terms of crafting the Barbados position on certain matters relating to education. I have to commend CXE recently in having stakeholder engagement dialogue in Barbados, and our parent group was invited by the Ministry of Education to be part of that dialogue with CXE along with other education stakeholders. So my answer to that question is, when the government not just sends the signal, but in material, tangible ways, includes parents in decision making, that in itself sends the real tangible signal that there is a change. I would say, though, that communication is crucial and that we have to continue to work on communicating with parents so that there are as many mechanisms as possible for parental engagement.
Is it working? It's not working. Oh, it's working. Okay. Yeah, that's a great question and a big concern. And Dr. Bristow kind of raised it in her presentation earlier this morning. I don't know if there's a easy answer to this, but definitely inclusion should be enshrined in the principles of the partnership. So as partners, including from the government, from the parents, from the teachers, I think there needs to be some sort of national agreement and that enshrines the principle of inclusivity. And then through this is at least on a political will, because without the will, there's no, it's easy to kind of not include or exclude. So there needs to be a will. But then we need the mechanisms. And so for the mechanisms, it's very important then, for example, when parents are speaking on behalf of the parents and on behalf of the children, have they actually set the mechanism that are inclusive, some like inclusive fora to actually collect that data from different types of students, different types of parents? Have they actually targeted on purpose collecting the experiences of different parents and children? So I think there needs to be a deliberate exercise in how inputs are collected and not assuming we know everything. So creating some sort of fora or data collected from different types of constituencies that constitute our student body and our parent body is essential. And then maybe in tracking what matters, actually putting those data, right? Like putting the boys and girls, putting students with special education needs, etc., and seeing, are we actually delivering for all of our students? That's only a few ways, right? But for sure, starting with the political will and then kind of developing the right mechanisms for getting inputs from everyone.
Thanks. And if I could just add maybe one thing, I mean, I think if there is the political will, and we're clear on what it means to be inclusive, then I think we put the question back to our schools who know the communities best. And we know, those schools will know who's coming to PTA and who's not coming to PTA, and how we can better reach some of those voices that have been excluded, perhaps by design, around how the PTA executive works. So, I mean, I think we have a lot of expertise, and it's just asking the right questions to get the tailored responses. So thank you for those questions. I see two more, and I was remiss if you could please say your name and your organization before you ask your question. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Alistair Thomas, the president of Antigua and Barbuda National Parent Teachers Association. It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the invaluable contribution that these two entities or movement associated with Sister Paula Ann Moore made to parents, students, and the Caribbean. For some reason, it seemed that it was swept under the carpet, which is a tendency in the Caribbean. But in Antigua, remember, in 2020, we were still reeling from the impact of COVID. And so when we read in the press that there was a movement that picked up an anomaly in the results of CXC, and not only brought it to the attention, but introduced activism and militancy for the parents in a society that seemingly parents are not prepared to go beyond a certain stage. But your movement and your activism stood up for us at a time when we're still shaking from COVID to ensure that CXC and the Ministry of Barbados of Education look seriously at the complaint and address it. And so for me, that is invaluable. And I think what it says also in that process is that, as I am a part of one of the founding members of what will be now concretized as the Caribbean Council of National Parent Teachers Association, that this is evidence, irrefutable evidence, that you may not be associated with the established institution, and as you said, in the initial stage, you had advanced your organization to the established PTAs, and you did not get the kind of response. If your group did not have the kind of tenacity, it would have been dropped, and our children's career, because the result is not just instantaneous or just temporary, it's long-term, that kind of result, if it was left as it was. So prolonging the campaign brought benefit to all of us. And what that says, that as part of this new institution, I think there is an urgent need for us to look at inclusivity of organization, and individuals can make invaluable contribution. And if we leave them out in this new landscape, we're defeating the purpose. And I would hope that whatever we are doing, that your movement can be integrated, even if we need to, and movements such as yours, even if we have to look at amending our constitution, because as you say, it's not just about talk and narrative. What we are having here is empirical evidence that the proof is not only in the pudding, but we have eaten the pudding by getting CXC to accept that there was an anomaly, and had it not been for the kind of campaign, we would not have gotten that result. So an organization like yours, I think, in every respect, knowing that this is being recognized even at CARICOM level, I think as the Caribbean Council, I would want to see that your movement, like all other movements, that we maximize on whatever human resource that are in fact looking at the interests of our children and their future in education. Thanks.
Thank you very much for reaffirming, I think, what some of our presenters have already spoken on. In the interest of time, I've been given the 10-minute card, so I would cede the floor to the gentleman. Yes.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Me again, Andrew Sharp from the Caribbean Disability Network. And I was so glad to hear Mr. Marvis spoke about civil society. I would have loved to get more detail on how civil society has intertwined into the whole PTA systems, and also this is a public announcement. The Caribbean Disability Network is hosting the Caribbean Disability Conference right here in this room, October the 17th, and the discussion is on inclusive education for all abilities. So we'd love for you to join us, both in person or virtually, because we're going to be addressing some of those matters. And I just want to remind all the PTA, let's not forget about disability. There's a lot of parents out there who have kids with disability, and our board member, Janelle, was the one who spoke earlier, and we just want to make sure that. And we're open to work with the PTA, the Caribbean Disability Network, with 12 Caribbean countries, so reach out to us. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lyndon Lashley, University of Guyana. Now, I lead one of the Caribbean Development Bank most invested project in education in Guyana, the University of Guyana Early Childhood Center of Excellence. So I want to make 3 points as it relates to parental engagement, parental participation, and parental inclusion. Now, firstly, when the center began its operation, we realized that one section of parents were dominating the participation in decision-making, in resource contribution, and in the discourse relative to inclusion, relative to equity, and relative to the experiences the children have. So we realized we had to give agency, autonomy, and power to a marginalized group of parents. And those group of parents include parents with disabilities, parents with other vulnerabilities, and parents of migrant background. And giving those parents agency, autonomy, and power had to come from within the structures, systems, and processes of the institution. So as we engage here today and we discuss all the practices and suggestions, we need to remember these foundations. But when you do these things as well, you need to recognize that you have to write into the structure and function of the institution to accommodate these without having competing propositions and competing positions. So you must have a unified value. You can find an example of this on the center's website on the research done in 2023, where we try to understand how we could have made this better. And this married nicely into Dr. Bristol's presentation this morning, so you can have additional information. Secondly, we needed to change the culture and the ethos of the institution. Parents have a voice, and that voice is powerful. Teachers have a voice, and that voice is equally powerful because sometimes teachers fall in a dual role of both parent and educator. So you need now to navigate the terrain when those two are colliding and having competing discourses as to where we should go further. And finally, when all that is said and done, when we consider all of that and we consider the evolutions in technology, in teacher training, in teacher education, and in the metaphase and the learning environment, we need to recognize the children's input in what is happening. So consider those 3 elements and we are on a good path. Thank you to all the presentations today.
Thank you. With 5 minutes remaining, I'm going to allow our presenters to maybe make 1 minute, and I mean 1 minute wrap-up statements, and then we'll conclude the session.
Thank you, Neva, and thank you for all the inputs. I mean, maybe I'll go back to the beginning. It's like I think the experts are actually in the room, and if we bring everybody in together, especially now and before the end of the symposium in the constitution of, but not maybe only the constitution, because the constitution is just a legal agreement, but in the philosophy, if we can bring all together in the vision and the philosophy and the principle of how we can contribute all together as a partnership to education system transformation, that will be great, and that would be the greatest value of this symposium, is not only getting the CCN PTA launched, but also aligning all together on a common vision and a common way of working. And I basically responding a bit on the civil society and parents, and let's not forget that a lot of people a lot of the people in civil society are actually parents. So they mostly speak a lot from their experience as parents. But they do play complementary role, and a lot of the work is how civil society, because usually civil society is much more organized, how they could bring some of this capacity building and training and competency to the parents and to the PTAs as well. So this is something that could be supported following. But we do need all those diverse voices and competencies to come together. Thanks.
Paula Ann, 30 seconds.
I just want to summarize by saying again that the point and the objective of the symposium is that of change, which is something that we as human beings often find uncomfortable and difficult. But clearly, once it's transformative and positive, it's something that we need to embrace. My two takeaways is number one is inclusivity. And I would again exhort that the new entity being formed ensures that non-PTA members who are parents who have dedicated and indicated that they're eager and willing and have demonstrated a track record of effectiveness when it comes to parental representation and our children's best interests have a seat at the table. I thank Mr. Thomas for his kind words. Accountability is another buzzword, and we need to demonstrate that we set a clear vision and have tangible performance indicators to make sure that the outcomes that arise out of this symposium are measurable and can be monitored and assessed. So again, inclusivity, accountability, and we will all put our shoulder to the wheel collaboratively once we hold our children's best interests as our guiding North Star in all that we do. Thank you again, and I wish you all the very best in the rest of this symposium and its outcome.